tale of retaliation, desperation, and a scramble to redraw the industrial map before the metal curtain slammed shut for good. Stay with us, because in a few minutes, you will understand how a single policy could ripple across every sector, auto, aerospace, defense, and how, if you think you're insulated from the fallout, you may be dead wrong. And if you haven't yet, hit subscribe and tap that notification bell, because in this new era, information is the only shield you have. Within 72 hours of Trump's post, the official communique arrived. The 25% tariff, long feared but familiar, had been doubled overnight. Every ship unloading European steel or aluminum at U.S. ports faced the same message. Pay half again as much to bring your cargo ashore or sail home empty. The stated justification: to protect American submarine hulls, fighter jet fuselages, and other defense components from the risk of foreign dependency. But behind that rhetoric lurked another calculation: the belief that America's steel mills, some idled for decades, could roar back to life if foreign imports were simply priced out of the market. Yet, if history has taught us anything, it is that such moves never happen in a vacuum. In Brussels, the response was instant. European Commission leaders called an emergency summit, and within hours declared the tariff a violation of World Trade Organization rules. But they didn't just lodge a complaint. They began drafting a retaliation package designed to hurt precisely where it counted most: swing state manufacturers and agricultural exporters whose votes were critical to Trump's re-election. For Detroit automakers, the shock was immediate. Internal memos leaked to the Financial Times revealed that the cost of a typical aluminum-bodied pickup truck would jump by as much as $1,300 per unit. That is not a rounding error. It is the entire profit margin on the country's best-selling vehicles. Meanwhile, Airbus executives quietly warned that titanium and specialty steel components sourced from European suppliers could see price hikes of 40% or more. That means delays, that means cancellations, that means jobs. Thousands of jobs. And across the Atlantic, in ports from Antwerp to Hamburg, European metals producers faced a grim calculus: find new buyers overnight, or let inventories pile up in warehouses, rusting by the ton. But it was Canada, America's longtime partner under the USMCA, that delivered the first real counterpunch. Within 24 hours, Prime Minister Mark Carney stood before cameras in Ottawa and announced a sweeping 25% tariff of his own, targeting nearly $30 billion of U.S. exports. Not just metals, everything from farm equipment to snack foods. Then, he unveiled a procurement policy that would bar American firms from bidding on Canadian infrastructure contracts worth billions. Some in Washington laughed it off. They would soon stop laughing, because Canada didn't stop there. They activated a 14-day tariff review mechanism, meaning that with every stalled negotiation, duties could be dialed up, down, or sideways. No more static battle lines. A dynamic, moving target. A chessboard where the next move could come without warning. It didn't take long for the consequences to appear. The American Metals Export Association reported that 12% of steel orders were canceled in the first week. Commodity exchanges spiked. Midwest hot-rolled coil prices surged 12% in days, and aluminum premiums leaped more than 50%. Wall Street analysts started shredding their quarterly forecasts. And while the White House projected confidence, internal economic models at the Treasury told a darker story. For every $100 added to the cost of raw steel, downstream prices multiplied. Appliances, cars, construction materials. But what about the defense sector? The very justification for the tariffs. Here, the irony was impossible to ignore. A Pentagon procurement memo leaked to Reuters admitted that replacing European aerospace alloys would take 18 to 36 months, time the military simply didn't have if global tensions worsened. By mid-June, European Commission President Ursula von der Leyen declared that Brussels would proceed with a lawsuit at the WTO. But quietly, European trade envoys were preparing a second front, forging deeper steel alliances with Canada, Japan, and South Korea. If America wanted to play hardball, the EU would play a long game, building new supply corridors that excluded U.S. firms entirely. Meanwhile, the ripple effects touched sectors nobody expected. The U.S. housing market, already wobbling from high interest rates, began to tremble as steel frame home costs spiked. New home sales fell nearly 14% in May alone. And then there was the political angle. Republican senators, many from Rust Belt states, began to sense the danger. Inflation was already a campaign issue. The thought of price hikes on everything from cars to canned goods was enough to send them scrambling for cover. Still, the administration pressed on. No exemptions, no carve-outs. The message, America first, no matter who else fell behind. And yet, in boardrooms and trade ministries from Tokyo to Berlin, a new consensus was forming. If the United States would not honor decades of open trade, it could no longer be trusted as the cornerstone of the supply chain. That's when Europe unveiled its most audacious play yet, the Green Steel Pact. Imagine this. An entire industrial policy predicated on slashing emissions by 30% in the steel sector by 2030, funded by billions in subsidies and tax credits. Europe knew that as America walled itself off, cheap steel would flood global markets. Rather than race to the bottom, they decided to outcompete with cleaner, higher quality output. In Canada, Carney launched something similar, funneling billions into from pit to pickup investments in hydrogen-powered furnaces, carbon-free steel plants, and rail infrastructure connecting the nickel-rich Ring of Fire to Ontario's auto belt. In less than 90 days, the outlines of a new world order in metals took shape, one where North America's supply chain no longer revolved around Detroit, but around Hamilton, Toronto, and European ports. But perhaps the most unsettling part was the speed. In past eras, industrial shifts took decades. Now, a single presidential tweet could redraw the map in weeks. If you followed us this far, take a moment to hit subscribe and leave a like. These updates don't just explain history, they track the hidden gears shaping your cost of living. By July, commodity traders began warning that spot prices for hot-rolled steel and aluminum could surge again if talks failed. The CME Futures Exchange saw record volumes, and in Brussels, the countdown clock ticked toward July 14th. The deadline the EU set for America to walk back its tariffs or face countermeasures. What happens if no compromise emerges? The next escalation is already scripted. Canada lifts its tariffs to 50%. Europe slashes import quotas and imposes origin certification that effectively locks out U.S. steel. American manufacturers face a choice: pay more, move production abroad, or simply shrink. Behind the headlines, ordinary people brace for impact. Every pickup truck, every bridge girder, every airplane fuselage, all of it more expensive, all of it entangled in the latest showdown. This is not the end. It is only the beginning. Because as the 2025 election season heats up, tariffs are no longer policy, they are performance. And when trade wars become theater, the curtain never really falls. If you want to keep following this unfolding story, the hidden alliances, the retaliatory tariffs, the domino effects, stay tuned. And remember, in the end, it isn't the politicians who foot the bill. It's all of us. Subscribe now so you don't miss the next chapter of this economic drama, because the next twist may come with the sunrise and the next tweet. And yet, even after all this, the story refuses to end. The tariffs may have begun as a policy lever, but they've become something far more unpredictable, an unstable currency of influence, revenge, and political calculation. As the calendar flips deeper into 2025, the pressure is no longer just economic. It is psychological. The markets can absorb shocks, supply chains can adapt eventually, but what they cannot tolerate is uncertainty weaponized. What happens when a $2 trillion trade relationship hangs on the mood of a single politician, when executives plan investments based not on strategy, but on the chance of waking up to another 3 a.m. tariff tweet? And who profits from the chaos? Foreign adversaries watching the Western alliance fracture, or opportunistic multinationals quietly reshuffling their loyalties? Already we see signs of a deeper realignment. German steelmakers, long reliant on U.S. orders, are shifting focus to Asia. Japanese automakers are accelerating their investments in India. Canadian firms are quietly drafting 10-year offtake agreements with European buyers, cutting out the American middleman altogether. And in Mexico, logistics hubs near Lázaro Cárdenas and Veracruz are booming as Chinese steel reroutes through third-party smelters, skirting origin-based restrictions. Does Washington see this? Do they care? Or is the tariff war not a miscalculation, but a deliberate reordering, where chaos is the point, and where economic loyalty must now be bought, not built? Meanwhile, back home, the impact is intensifying. Consumer prices are no longer rising slowly, they're accelerating. The Bureau of Labor Statistics quietly revised its inflation forecast in early July, noting structural input volatility as the new driver. Refrigerators up 7%, construction hardware up 4%. Basic utility infrastructure now costing counties 11 to 13% more than budgeted, forcing cities to delay bridges, sewage repairs, even schools. And what about rural America? The forgotten swing states who were promised revitalized factories and blue-collar paychecks. Instead, farmers in Iowa are paying more for aluminum irrigation tubing, while small-town contractors can't afford rebar for local housing developments. In Tennessee, a mid-size appliance manufacturer just furloughed 380 workers, citing raw material surcharges. How long until it ripples through payrolls, mortgages, and consumer credit? If this is a strategy, where is the end game? Or is this the end game? A new normal where volatility is permanent and economic pain is simply reframed as patriotic sacrifice? And what does the Pentagon think now that aerospace contractors are publicly warning about substitution delays for specialty alloys? It's no longer just commercial supply chains under stress, it's national security timelines, missile casings, aircraft components, vehicle armor. Reports suggest delays in F-35 assembly may extend into Q1 2026. At what point does a trade war become a defense liability? But the most remarkable development might be this: the rest of the world is not standing still. The so-called Steel Shield Pact between Canada, the EU, Japan, and South Korea is rapidly becoming a new trade bloc in everything but name. Behind closed doors, they're designing shared melt-and-pour traceability systems, real-time customs databases, and coordinated anti-dumping measures that make it almost impossible for cheap Chinese metal to slip through. They're not just responding, they're building. Building without the U.S., a quiet consensus is forming. If America insists on going it alone, others will go it together. That is the cost of unpredictability. That is the consequence of mistaking leverage for loyalty. And those who think this is just about steel and aluminum, they haven't been paying attention. Copper, lithium, rare earths, cement, EV batteries. The architecture of trade itself is now under reconstruction. And the longer this continues, the less likely it is that the old structure will ever return. Will the United States be welcomed back into those supply chains when the dust settles? Or will it find the doors locked, the terms rewritten, the trust broken? Even now, on the edge of mid-July, the clock ticks toward the next flashpoint. Canada's tariff review deadline is days away. If no progress is made, Ottawa has signaled it will not only raise tariffs to 50% but expand them. The new list reportedly includes industrial machinery, aerospace components, refined fuels, and even medical instruments. Will Washington blink or escalate further? Meanwhile, Brussels has quietly drafted contingency measures targeting American tech and agricultural exports, contingent on whether Washington walks back tariffs by July 30th. If not, retaliatory tariffs could strike everything from Texas beef to Silicon Valley software licenses. Are American voters prepared for that backlash? And still, the White House remains firm. No concessions, no negotiations, just slogans and declarations. But the markets are less patient. Analysts warn that another commodity shock could spike inflation again by 4 to 0, 6 percentage points in Q3. Interest rate cuts now look distant. Mortgage rates remain frozen at post-pandemic highs, and bond markets pricing in another 6 months of volatility. Even retail giants are bracing for pain. Internal Walmart memos warn of significant inventory cost pressure across appliances, shelving units, and construction goods. Amazon is preparing a 3% seller fee hike to offset increased import duties on packaging and electronics. This will not stay invisible. It will appear in your cart, in your receipt, in your rent. How did we reach a point where global diplomacy is conducted not in summits, but in subtweets? Where steel production is no longer just about industry, but identity? Where economic strategy has become electoral theater? This isn't just a clash of trade policies, it's a battle over the soul of globalization. One side believes in decoupling. The other is building a new ecosystem without the United States. And between them is a fault line stretching from factory floors in Michigan to shipyards in Rotterdam to data centers in Seoul. Whichever path wins will shape the next decade. But right now, we're in the middle of the storm. And storms don't ask for permission. They just come. So the question is, are we watching the rise of a new economic Iron Curtain, or is this simply a warning shot? A test to see who blinks first. If you've made it this far, ask yourself, who stands to benefit from this disarray? Who profits when allies fracture and enemies circle? If you see what's coming and you want to stay ahead, hit that subscribe button right now. Like this video, share it, because soon this won't just be news, it'll be your reality. And when that next headline drops, be it another tariff, another retaliation, or another market panic, you'll already know the backstory, the pattern, the pressure points. This is no longer about policy. This is about survival in an economic world where the rules change with every sunrise. Stay alert. Stay informed. And whatever you do, don't stop asking questions. Because when the truth is buried beneath politics, only those paying attention will see the cracks before the collapse. Smash that like, drop your thoughts in the comments, and we'll see you in the next one. Because the next chapter is already being written. Sometimes it doesn't start with a bang. It doesn't begin with an emergency press conference or a thunderclap of applause in a packed hall. Sometimes it starts with the quiet tap of a fingertip against a phone screen, a single post that slips into the algorithm, buried between vacation selfies and political rants. One moment, a digital whisper. The next, an earthquake under the world's biggest economies. And so it was on an otherwise unremarkable morning, when Donald Trump, a man never known for measured gestures, typed a short declaration into his Truth Social account, a declaration that would light a fuse under America's factories, its trading partners, and the very idea of the global supply chain. He recommended a 50% tariff on every ounce of steel and aluminum crossing the Atlantic from the European Union. The date was June the 1st. The time, 12:01 a.m., a timestamp that would soon be etched into balance sheets and boardroom nightmares. At first, there was disbelief. After all, only weeks earlier, a fragile truce with China had been announced. Industry analysts dared to hope that the president might finally ease his obsession with tariffs as blunt force weapons. Instead, the opposite unfolded. He dusted off Section 232 of the Trade Expansion Act, a Cold War-era provision designed to protect U.S. military production, and he swung it like an iron cudgel. But before you assume this is just another trade skirmish, consider this. Never in modern history had the White House classified the European Union, America's closest democratic ally, its largest trading partner, the very cradle of NATO itself. As a national security threat on par with hostile regimes, it wasn't merely a tax, it was a reclassification, a declaration that the friendly exchange of goods had become a matter of existential risk. This is the story of what followed.